Be perfectly natural.
Yeah, yeah. You know what book I just got is I got this one. The one by Bruce Perry
Oh
and
yeah.
Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry.
Mm-hmm.
See what that one, yeah. Oh, yes, something
Oh,
to
I
try.
think we're on.
Are we?
Yes.
All right.
Hi.
All right. How's everybody doing? I'm really excited that you're here with me today and joining us for this Ask CDI. So how's everybody doing today?
Wonderful.
Good.
Wonderful.
Ready.
I'm doing
And
okay. Thank you, Leena.
excellent. Okay, and so Maria, you're in Newfoundland. And how's
Newfoundland and
that? And
Labrador, yes,
and what time is it there now?
is exactly 8:30. Yes.
It's 8:30. Okay. And we have Farai and we have Amanda. And Farai, you're in Toronto?
I am in Toronto.
You're in
Yes.
Toronto, obviously. And Amanda?
Durham region.
And Durham region. Okay, well, I think it's 7 o'clock. So welcome everybody who's joining us tonight for the Ask CDI. We're really excited that you're here with us. And we're talking tonight about powerful teaching strategies for promoting success in children with behavioral challenges. And before I start, we at CDI always like to start with a land acknowledgement. And so at CDI, we acknowledge that the land we're on, in which is the traditional territories of many nations, and these include the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, and the Métis people. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples of this land. We also want to recognize that, especially as many things are going on in this world, that racism and colonialism are both historic as well as present in the ongoing systemic and interpersonal oppression, violence, and aggression experienced by minority peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as allies, to really listen, and to follow their lead. As we meet today, and it's really great to be with you all today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. We ask that all participants, whether the participants on the panel or the participants observing or in the chat, consider and respect that there are so many varied ways of knowing and that diverse perspectives are enriched with dialogue. And so just wanted to say welcome. We also want to make sure that I want to remind you that our audience here, that this is a live and public discussion. And for the online safety, if you're participating in the conversation, and we really hope you will be, and that's the comment section, please avoid sharing personal information about others, particularly minors. And we also want to remind you, and this is really important, is that this is not therapy. This is not a therapy session, but it really is a discussion. And we hope that you join us in this discussion where we are sharing some of our experiences, our professional experiences and strategies that we know work that you may find helpful. So if you or your child are experiencing any serious issues, please seek out professional help in your community. And if you need, go to your nearest hospital. So just wanted to really be clear. So I'm delighted tonight to have some incredible colleagues of ours from our various communities, our various SNAP communities tonight with us. And I would love for them to introduce themselves. So I would like, Fry, why don't you start us off and introduce who you are and where you're from and a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Leena, for that warm introduction.
You're very welcome, Fry.
So I am Farai, and I am from Delta Family Resource Center, and we are one of many SNAP affiliate sites as SNAP continues to grow, which we're very proud of. And I represent Delta Family Resource Center, which is located in the Northwest area. So we service primarily the Rexdale, Black Creek, as well as some areas within the Peel region. And I am one of 3 agencies within the Greater Toronto area that's being designated to provide SNAP for families that are of African descent. And so the other 2 agencies, because I'm one of 3, would be Tropicana as well as CAFCAN. And we are funded by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services under the Ontario Black Youth Action Plan as an early intervention program.
Excellent. Thanks, Farai, and welcome. Maria, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Leena, and thanks for having me. It's great to be here with everyone. Thanks, Farai and Amanda, too. Look forward to this discussion. So I am talking to everyone from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I work with the SNAP program at Key Assets. And Key Assets does wonderful work with children and families, creatively trying to really enrich the lives of children and family for better outcomes. Um, I always like to tell folks when I introduce myself that I get nervous when I see the expert title
You're
on
not
the
an
screen.
expert?
Sorry. Just want to just put that out there
Uh,
front and center. And I also like to tell people that I am not a parent. And so when I introduce myself, I also like to share that right off the top because, as an expert, I think I've had years of experience working in a number of different communities. And I learn the most from families and children that I've been working with. But I also have to just send a shout out to the SNAP team at Key Assets. There are 9 child and family workers that are incredible, who do incredible work, and we all learn from each other about how to make SNAP work and to, make that success happen for families and children. So that's what I wanted to share a little bit about
Excellent.
myself and
Welcome,
just
Maria.
decrease the expectation just a little bit.
And that's why this is a discussion. And
Yeah.
that's why we're here from our very different experiences. So thank you. Amanda, what would you like to
Hi.
say?
I'm on board with Maria. No expert here, but I'm Amanda. I am with Kinark Child and Family Services, and I am the SNAP supervisor at the Durham and Peterborough location. We also have SNAP services at our Simcoe and York location, but they have different supervisors. So I just wanted to share that with all of that, we're very excited to be here talking and connecting with you all and kind of sharing some insight, hopefully, for you guys.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here and taking the time out of your evenings, as well as all our participants who are joining us for the next hour. So, we're going to talk about strategies, and these are strategies for promoting success in children with behavioral challenges. And the first thing I would like to take some time before we get into some of the questions, because we've already had questions posed to us, and so we are going to address those as we speak tonight in this kind of informal conversation we're kind of having here. But the first thing I really want to address is, why might children be having these behavioral challenges? And I think that's a really, really important question. And so I'm going to share over the next few minutes a little bit about what we know the research says. So I hope you just, as I talk about it, you think about what I might be saying, whether you agree with me, whether you don't. Please feel to add to the chat to help us out here as well. So back in 2017, I had a real great opportunity to go to the Cayman Islands as we were launching one of our SNAP sites in the Cayman Islands. And one of our colleagues there, Michael Miles, said to me as I was presenting to the community was, today our children are facing the perfect storm. And this, remember, it was back in 2017. And so when we started to talk more about it and looked into the research about why we think our kids might be facing this perfect storm, let me go through some of the things we know. We know that, for example, there are so many what we call risk factors that could um, be impeding on our kids, and things like racism, school failure, poverty, abuse, neglect, bullying, um, challenging parenting, even mental health issues. And these cause all kinds of things. For example, our kids might get angry, they may get frustrated, they may get sad, they may get worried, they may get anxious. So all these different types of risk factors, and there's many, many more, I'm not being exhausted by any ways, can cause what we call our social determinants of health to kind of fall apart. These are the building blocks of healthy child development. And those building blocks are things like great relationships, attachment, good attachment with parent child, or even a caregiver and a child, culture and gender and genetics and social supports and safety and community and education. These are all things that create healthy child development. But when these things start to fall apart, that's where the research shows us, and we also know, is where we start to get kids who are angry, kids who are sad, kids who may get in conflict with the law, and it also leads to school problems, mental health problems, and major family issues. And so when we think about this, we have to think about what is going on. And so my first question is, on top of all of this, we know there have been so many other things our families, our kids, our communities have been dealing with. And I'm wondering if any of you can kind of expand on that a little bit more on what your thoughts are.
Sure. Can I take that, Lena?
Absolutely, Fry.
All right.
This is great.
So
Just jump in. This is what we need. Thank you, Fry.
here you go. So as a person who identifies as being Black, right? On a
Mhm,
global level, there have been a lot of
mhm.
things which many of all of us have been privy to, looking at some of the injustices that have happened and they're not being televised. But these are common occurrences that have been occurring for a lot of our young people, a lot of our families. So as an adult, I can say that's a lot. And as most
That's
adults
a
can
lot.
probably relate, looking at it, that's a lot that's happening. But imagine for our children, right? How they're able to process that, right? So we talked about the compounding factors such as culture, race, and anti-racism and all those pieces. But I think as well, when we think about it, I think we have to address and understand that there's some disparities that have been are a reality for a lot of our families, right? So when we look at BIPOC people, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color, specifically around anti-Black racism within various systems, not only the school level, but policing, a number of areas, right? For the purpose of this discussion, we'll just focus on with our school and our children, right? They're
Right.
suspended at a higher rate for the same behaviors. They're sent home more often. And a lot of times they're being placed in CPI holds. They're physically isolated in the classroom for months on end. And these are also now only being recognized as human rights violations. And so imagine all these things happening and you're 6, 7, experiencing these on a daily basis. These are events that for an adult, that would be a lot, but for a child, imagine before you've even
Absolutely.
finished the first grade that you've had multiple negative interactions with your school. What sort of school career do you think you possibly have, right? So starting off at 6, you in the double digits of multiple suspensions, right, and all these other experiences on top of dealing with the images you're seeing of the things that are impacting us on a global scale. So
Yeah.
these are some of the things that we have to consider as well when we're talking about things that are happening for our children, but also for our communities as well.
Fry, thank you, because you raised some extremely important things. And as we talk about being allies and we talk about really listening and trying to understand, I think those are critical things. So as we go through our discussion, I'm hoping that as we get into some of the strategies and solutions, we could talk more about how to help our kids and our families deal with specific things that you raised. Okay, so the other thing is that I really wanted to bring up is this pandemic. So here we talked about all these risk factors that, as Michael Miles said in 2017, which we all knew from the research. But on top of that, what Farai just raised with everything that's going on, and now we have this pandemic as well, and there's no vaccine for mental health problems. Okay, so what we know is that COVID-19 and this pandemic, and I have said this time and time again, is one of the biggest health crises that will be in our generations forever, like for a long time. And it's causing a lot of issues like our kids to feel lonely and there's a loss of freedom. I have young people in this home that feel like they're just like isolated and irritable and stressed. And I think one of the things that we really have to remember is it is a really difficult time for kids that are struggling with their mental health, especially vulnerable youth and youth from minority populations, as Farai indicated, at a particular risk for worsening mental health issues. And when CMHO, Children's Mental Health Ontario, did the survey and study, they found that 59% of parents are noting drastic changes in the behavior of their kids, whether it's outbursts or irritability or personality changes or sleep disturbances or sadness. And 83% of parents or caregivers whose kids were already experiencing difficulties, they say are getting worse. So really, we have to think about this is a time when we must like we really have to think about how do we pull together and how do we look out for those who are most at risk. And I think at this point, I think everyone's at risk, especially to help, um, I guess, everyone who felt like they've kind of lost their support. And so I want you to remember this one thing. I want you to hold up your hand for a second if you can. I want you to remember that 1 in 5, okay? So 1 in 5 kids are struggling with their mental health. I think we can all say 100% of us on this call or listening can say that they know somebody with a mental health issue. Okay. So when you think about our kids, 1 in 5. All right. So we need to really think about what is going on and what ends up happening. These are the kids, as we've started to talk about, that schools and others find that these are the kids that are disruptive and or are causing some issues. And so what people will say is like, what is wrong with these kids? But in fact, it's not the right question. Given the impact of the pandemic, I love what Dr. Jody Carrington says. She says every time you think of calling a kid attention seeking this year, so remember, every time you think of calling a kid attention seeking, consider changing it to connection seeking and see how your perspective changes. So what I want you to do is I'm hoping this video will work. So I'm going to share this. This is Kevin and Emma. But as I play this video, I want you to think about, the 1 in 5. I want you to think about 5 kids, you know, 5 kids, and unfortunately, one of those 5, as I said, may have some issues or more of them. So listen to what Kevin and Emma say and what they need at the very end. Let's see if I can share this, and let's see what happens. And then we're going to get into these discussions. So I'm going to make sure this works, the video, so you can hear it, and then I'll play it. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that? Okay. So let me play that.
When people look at me, they see a bully, a delinquent, a problem. People see my outbursts, my fists, my frustration. People see the trips to the principal's office and the kid they don't want in their class.
They see a liar, a troublemaker, a lost cause. They see my outbursts, my dirty looks, my frustration. People see the girl who gets sent home from school and the girl you wouldn't leave alone with your purse.
People see a bad son, that boy who made their kid cry, or who'd ruin your birthday party. People see all these things, but they don't see me.
People see a mean sister, the way I swear at my dad, and the kid who leaves their mom crying in the parking lot. People see all these things, but they don't see me.
My name's Kevin, and I could be more than this.
My name is Emma, and I can be more than this.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing that for a second. So you can see that, these kids are hurting. There's a lot of things going on, but I'm wondering if you guys can tell me what you took away from that video a little bit. I took away the visuals because I thought I wanted people to really kind of think about kids that they've worked with or kids they know or their own children. What do you think?
I think it's so important to think of that question, or what they said at the end, to see me, because a lot of times we see behaviors, right, before we actually see the child. And we know, as many people in the field, right, when a client or a kid first comes in and there's all of these presenting concerns, it's really important to get to know the kid, right, and who they are first, instead of seeing all of those behaviors. And so that's some of the work that can be done with the parents as well, because we get so used to seeing the behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who are these kids and what might be going on? And I think that question is what's going on, or why, what's happening to these kids, or what's going on, is the question really should be what happened to these kids. And Dr. Bruce Perry has talked about this for years. He just came out with a great book called What Happened to You, that he co-authored with Oprah Winfrey. And it really talks about that we tend to see the behavior, but we don't see what's behind the behavior. And trauma being a really critical and important one. There's all these other things, but trauma being a really big one. And so I guess the message that we want to share with everybody tonight is what happens to you does matter. Okay, so what happens to you does matter. So my question to the panel, the first major question here too is, if you had to sum up in one or two words, what comes to your mind about what our families have gone through in the last year through the pandemic? What comes to your mind? What would you say? Like to go?
I can go first. I would say, really, a loss of outlets. So, for both parents and the kids, the parents have lost maybe their jobs, maybe where they would go during the day and get a bit of relief from even their child,
Right.
and their social circles. And then the kids have also lost their social circles, and even where they would get out their energy in sports and extracurricular. And so I would say, like, the loss of outlets has been huge this year.
Yeah, so thanks, Amanda. Anybody else? What about you, Farai? What would you think would be words that come to your mind?
I think for some of our families, I would say survivors, uh, surviving, going into survival mode, right?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when you're in crisis, in a crisis situation, you learn to deal with what you have and prioritize what's more important. And although on the outside it looks like things are falling apart in one area, it's a matter of looking at what is in the best interest for me and my family, and how do we best move forward in light of what's going on. Because you can try to take it all on, but as many of us have probably figured out, it's a lot to balance a lot of different
It
things.
is.
So most of our families,
Yeah.
especially in our community, are having to pick and choose which things to focus on, but surviving through it, right? And so that's
Yeah.
been a big thing for our families.
So I hear outlets, I hear survival. Maria, what about you?
Yes, all of those things. I think people, I've heard from people who were just getting by, and the typical supports that would be there were no longer there, or are no longer there because of restrictions. Schools that provided, things like lunch programs are no longer available. But I just want to echo what Farai said, that I've also heard from some families, despite the loss, and despite the isolation, the extra stress, the unknown, the anxiety and worry, that um, that being in the space home together, some people have been able to prioritize, or have been able to see some benefits of being together, and the benefits of focusing on what's happening in the here and now at home. And I'm not saying that this is rainbow and sunshine, that the
Mm,
pandemic is been okay, but I do know that there has been some moments of reflection for some people where that has brought some clarity, and there has been some success, or some regaining of relationships that may have been lost due to the complexities and busyness of our lives. So
So
those are
being
things
really
that.
resilient, I hear resiliency, right? That families have been creative and resilient as well. But what are some warning signs? So what are some warning signs that we should be concerned about? Like we call those red flags. So, what are some things do you think that we really need to be thinking about if we are really concerned that our kids are struggling?
I think
What
some
do you
common ones that, because a lot of times we usually wait until things are kind of reach the boiling point, right? And then we sort of
Yeah,
look for interventions, but there are some signs along the way that can kind of give us an indication something is not quite right, right? And so I think looking at changes in that child's behavior that are not attributed to child development, right? So if the child is not has not reached puberty, so you might not attribute that to puberty, but there's some signs you can clearly see, like my child is withdrawn. They're no longer participating in things that they normally would have been prior.
yeah,
Something is different here. Outside of the traumatic events that are happening on a global scale, looking at what else could be going on for my child, right? How can I've noticed a difference in their behavior, how they're responding to me. Maybe they're shorter in how they're responding, or maybe they're just not responding at all, right? Withdrawing can
yeah.
look in a lot of different ways for a lot of our children, right? So this are changes in behavior, our first red flag or an indicator that something might not be quite right. So let's start having that conversation then before it becomes they're not talking to me at all. For a longer
So
period of time.
changes in their behavior, changes in personality. As a parent, caregiver, you kind of have that sense that something's not right, right? That something's going on. Anything else that we should be thinking about or worrying about as a flag?
I would just say the the best thing about early intervention is catching these red flags earlier on, and there's the externalizing behaviors, right? Aggression,
Yeah,
anger, things that are in your face, more defiant behavior, and then there's really those internalizing behaviors that Farai was kind of speaking to as well, with the withdrawing and even self-harm, right, when it's on you, and those behaviors I find go longer without intervention because it's
mm,
not as in your face or maybe disruptive to the family. And so those are definitely ones to look for and pay attention. And they're just as important as the ones that might be disruptive to the
no,
family.
good
Yeah.
point. Good point, Amanda. And Maria, anything else you would like to add in regards to any kind of red flags?
I would say that we often look at the child's behavior as the biggest worry, but I would like to also highlight, the environment and the caregivers in the child's world can also be red flags. So if there are caregivers out there who are feeling like unable to manage stress as they may have typically been able to, or find it difficult to remain calm or even compassionate towards their children during these times, those can also be red flags too, right? That um,
Absolutely.
the capacity within the household is no longer there, or you're not able to empathize or see things from your child's perspective. So those would be other things
No,
I'd add to
so
those excellent
excellent.
points that you made.
Yeah, excellent points that you all made. So I think to sum up, when we need to be concerned as a parent or caregiver, and if there's educators on this call as well, on this CDI Ask session is, you know your kids as well. You know your students. They're with you all day. So starting with what Maria said with the caregivers, as a caregiver, if you're not able to manage your stress, you're not able to handle things, those are red flags. If the caregivers or even the kids have problems with family relationships, um, we talked about aggression, we talked about verbal aggression, lack of self-control and problem solving, for example, and then difficulty making and keeping healthy relationships. Dr. Deborah Pepler, one of our mentors and senior research associates at CDI, has talked about relationships, and how critical that is. And then we have to remember kids who are seemingly sad or experiencing what we call depressive symptomatology, or they're extremely anxious or withdrawn, or they may be vandalizing or damaging property, stealing, bullying, irritability, and inattention. These are all red flags that we really need to kind of think about. So, question here. So, what are some things that you would suggest to families who may be struggling with their own behavior and also their child's behavior? So, what are some things that you think would be helpful? Let's start with the caregivers. What are some things that can suggest to a caregiver?
Maybe I could start from maybe where
Yeah,
we get most of our referrals from, especially with caregivers, right? It's from the
yeah.
family doctor. So a lot
Okay.
of times we try to look for, I don't know where the specialist is. I don't know if the list. I've never had this experience, and nobody in my family has ever talked to me about where to start about finding a specialist, right? So with most of our families, we have some. I guess I could say in the Rexall area, we have a lot of great physicians in this area. A lot of them are referring the children to our SNAP program, right?
Okay.
Because although they might not be licensed or be physically able to provide the counseling supports, they're able to identify those changes in that child as well. Because most of our children spend a lot of time with their pediatricians, and so they're able
Right.
to recognize those pieces as well and to know developmentally where a child should be and what some of those challenges might be. So starting off with your family doctor and saying, hey, um, this is what's going on for me and my child, for me as well as my child. And then they could also be a starting point to where it could open up a lot of other resources that you might not even be aware of, right? Because sometimes we don't know where to start. It's overwhelming.
Exact.
There's so many
And I
options out there. Where do I
and
start?
And you're absolutely right. I think one of the stats is that of late that we found 76% of parents and caregivers don't know where to get help. So for you, what you said was absolutely point on, is we don't know. What else? Where else could we think about suggesting for families who are struggling with their own behavior or with their child's?
I would just suggest that they don't settle for a service that they're not satisfied with, or fear in starting a service because maybe they've had a bad past experience. I've heard numerous times kids, we're getting into kids now, but also caregivers who have come into service and said, like, I'm not really sure about this. I don't think I could do counseling again or this program because I had a really bad experience. So I know it's not for me and it won't work. And
Right.
I just want to say that every program and every therapist is also different, right? They're
Good point.
they're
Yeah.
their own people with their own personalities, and so maybe it wasn't a fit, but that doesn't mean that it won't be a fit for life, right?
Excellent. Good point. Good point, Amanda. Marie, anything else you'd like to add?
I think these are great points. And my points sort of echo that, which is just that, the change takes time and that it does take time to find a good fit, and that services that see your kids and your families as and see the potential and the good and what can come, like, that it offers hope is really key.
I think it's all you said, everybody said was really important and critical. It's the issue of hope and not giving up. And if you're not satisfied, do something else. Go to seek out, go to your family doctor. And then, when we were talking a little bit earlier, this morning, a little bit, we talked about the issue of stigmatized, like the
Yeah.
stigma of seeking out help. And, how do we get over that one? And do we even get over that one? You know, I'm not sure. That's a hard one. I know we're trying to break those barriers down within children's mental health, but we really, really, really need to listen and we need to really figure out how to get the right help. And I have been pushing and pushing for making sure you go to services that what we call measurement based care, where they really look at how they measure what's going on, and what we call evidence based services or evidence informed services, because I think that's really important. And you, as a parent and caregiver or an educator or children or youth, whoever, deserve the best possible services. So
Sorry,
I
Lisa,
think that's,
you
yeah,
triggered my memory. I was thinking
yeah,
when you mentioned that, I was like, yes. That's another thing. Especially looking, I know for different communities, these things are approached differently, right? And like you mentioned, there's a lot of stigma in a lot of different communities. But I think it's natural and normal to be concerned about what other people might think and what they might be saying. But like you mentioned before, putting at the forefront the wellness of your child and yourself has to be
yeah,
the utmost importance. So when you
yeah.
realize that, when you get to that point, then I know it's hard and it's not easy to be the first person in your family to say we're seeking out a counselor. But I think slowly we're doing quite a lot more. I know with Bell Canada and all the different agencies that are doing a lot to raise awareness on mental health services. When we have personalities that speak out and their own experiences, when we put a face to people that we think are that we can relate to, like, okay, this happens to a lot more people than we think, right? And like you mentioned, 1 in 5, right? It's more common than you think, but because we don't talk about it and we don't
1 in
normalize
5.
it, right? We don't normalize it, then it's easy to get stuck with the stigma. But is it worth suffering in silence, or better to get that out, right? So
Yeah.
I think choosing yourself and your child as a priority, as opposed to focusing on the stigma that's associated with it, recognizing it's real, but being able to say, you know what, I know what people might say something, or they might feel a way about how I'm responding, but ultimately, the most important thing is me and my child, and moving
Yeah.
from that point.
I know I came from a family, a European family, and that was something we really didn't talk about, right? It was never really talked about. And those are things that we need to be able to talk about. So I think, Amanda, you talked about the benefits of early intervention and getting them to the door and getting kids and families to the door in a timely manner. And so what would you say are some of the most important things that we should be focusing on with kids with behavioral disruptive behavior or behavioral challenges, however we want to say it? Like, what are some things that you think? I know there are a lot of things and it's complex and everybody's different, but what are some key things from your experience that you would say seem to be common pieces of that puzzle?
So I can just say, like, families are exhausted, especially now, right? And so families might even feel exhausted to even reach out for
That's true.
that early intervention or that help to start. But if you put the work and the time in the beginning, then it should be easier for you in the end. But one of those really key pieces is around emotion regulation, because that starts early. Like, we do the SNAP program at Kinark for 6 to 12 years old, right? But I think even with my 2-year-old, I'm doing some emotion regulation pieces.
So you
And
have to be using it, Amanda. You have to use it
I
yourself. I'm
I am
using this.
using my SNAP skills with my 2-year-old, so that it will benefit me in the long run. But right now, it's quite a battle.
Well,
I
I'm
guess.
using it with a 26-year-old, a 30-year-old, and a husband. So there you go. And oh, sorry, and a huge big dog now that comes and visits us. We call him our grand dog. So there you go, Leon.
Excellent.
So you're saying, Amanda, really, and you have a young 2-year-old at home, right? So emotion regulation and self-control, because we're depleted a little bit too, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about emotion regulation and SNAP in a few minutes, but what else do you think is really important to focus on? Anything else
I'll
you
just
think?
jump
Yeah,
right in
yeah,
there.
right, sure.
All right. Yeah. So one of the things we commonly say, and probably our parents that have come through our SNAP program probably hear this a lot, that they're the social agent of change, right? I
Right.
grew up in hopefully my mother is not watching this, but if she is, sorry, mom. But like, grew up in communities where people say, "Do as I say, not as I do." But a lot of times our children repeat what they see us do, and they repeat our responses. So a lot of times, if I have a not so long temper, if I have a short temper, my child is likely to respond in that manner because that's mainly what they've been able to observe, right? And so they have no frame of reference aside from what they've seen from myself and other people within my household, right? And so I think it's really important to understand that as a child who's growing up, they're primarily influenced by what they are seeing. So looking at what they're watching, what they're listening to, and who's influencing them, but primarily looking at yourself as a caregiver, right? Because again, we have a lot of parents, we have grandparents who are raising our children, but like as an adult who's helping raise this child, understanding that you are the model, the role model, whether you want that role or not. Unfortunately, whether you're an aunt, uncle, whatever role you play, there's a child there watching and observing you and learning from your behavior, right? So I think it starts early. It starts within the home with the caregiver, whoever that might be, modeling what they would like that child to do and be, right?
Yeah,
It's a hard time.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, an agent for change. Like we have to be that agent for change, and modeling is so critical. I remember, I can't tell you how many times, because it's okay to be angry, isn't it? So feelings are okay, everybody. Feelings are okay. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad, but it's how we handle it. I can't tell you, I'm sharing a lot here, but I can't tell you how many times my kids would say, "Mom, I think you need to read some of those books you're writing." Right? Like, because it's normal. We do get angry, we do get upset. So being an agent of change and modeling, I love that. Anything else that I think, Marie, do you have anything you want to add in regards to things that
I
you
am
feel?
having the lucky position of going after everyone else who has
I'm going
spoken
to call
and
on you
spoken
first
so
next time.
wisely. But I would just echo this because, I mean, I think that the environment and the family dynamic is so important. And sometimes I feel bad highlighting this to our caregivers and parents who are coming in because I feel like it's adding to this immense pressure. And sometimes there can be a lot of blame and shame coming from families who are
That's a
just
good
feeling
point.
like
Good
at
point.
the end of the rope. So hopefully, though, that when we kind of frame it in a different way that says, um, but if you do try something new and you can shift what's happening in your environment and how you're responding, may not happen the first time, but with practice and with some new attempts and small attempts, that these things can change and that there is immense power in that relationship when we can tune in and try to capitalize on strengths and some of those positive moments. So that's what I would
Yeah.
say.
Thank you for saying that because, like, I don't know about you being on these Zoom calls or WebEx calls during the day, and you see these working professionals with their kids, photobombing and running out in the background. And Amanda, earlier, your child was true. You're trying to put them down, and I think we got to give our parents a lot of, what way to goes, because it hasn't been an easy time. And I always say that parenting is one of the most rewarding jobs that you'll ever have, but it's also the most difficult, one of the hardest. You buy a computer, you get this huge manual and it's programmed and stuff like that. As a parent and caregiver, you have what you know, right? You have what you know. And so, can you share um, what parents or caregivers have said that have been the most helpful strategies or techniques that you have been able to share and your team has been able to work with them? Because I know you do evaluations and you hear what the parents tell you at the end of a SNAP program, for example, or a treatment intervention. What are some of the most helpful strategies that you can pinpoint that you can share? Who'd
I
like
will
to go?
go.
I'm
I
going to
will
go,
go
Maria.
first.
Go. Okay, Maria,
Here
there
we
you go.
go. All right. The one of the things that is just so amazing at the end of just 13 weeks when people come and spend time with us in our SNAP groups is really that people are so um, really happy about the change in relationships. And so I know
Okay.
this isn't a strategy, but people see that they have a closer relationship and that the relationship is the key element or strategy to focus on. And
So that's what Marie, so kind of sorry for cutting
yeah,
out. So that is one of the that's one of the outcomes is
yes,
improved strategy. But why do you
yes.
think that might be happening?
Okay. All right. I know you're trying to get to the nitty gritty, but you know what? It's like not, it's not a magic wand. Okay. So there is
Yes.
no magic wand to this. And so there is not one strategy that's going to work for everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing that does come out is that families feel heard and seen and supported by being with other families who are struggling with the same thing and
Okay.
who are supported to try new things and stick with it. And they see the success of others and say, wait, maybe this can work for me too. And it may take different time and attempts, but that is actually a thing.
Okay.
A
Okay.
strategy is peer
That they're
support.
not and they're not alone, right?
Yes,
That they're
yes,
not
yes.
alone, that there's lots of people struggling. And that
Yeah,
is it's almost like normalizing a little bit,
that's right.
as we said. Perfect.
And then the other strategy that is just like totally key is finding the positive moments
Mm.
to seize them and notice them and praise those moments, those small things. And I think that is very hard for families who can be like, huh, so much is happening. Schools are calling, doctors are calling,
Right.
no sleep, whatever. And it's hard to find those like small glimmers of hope, but trying to seize those moments where things are going well.
Yeah, I love that. At our camp, we call those gotcha words, right? We
Yeah.
gotcha, right? Where we catch kids, for example, when siblings are having a difficult time, and then all of a sudden, so you're on them all the time when they're fighting, but all of a sudden, when they're playing nicely, you don't want to say anything. You tippy-toe around them, right? But instead of saying, "Gosh, Farai and Amanda, I really love the way you're playing so nicely together." Right?
They
It's
are
the
really
gotcha.
playing really nicely, aren't they?
They are.
You too.
So anything else? Thanks, Maria. Those are really helpful. Anybody, Fry or Amanda, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I can go. So I just want to say, which we'll be talking a bit more about in just a little
Yes.
while, is our thoughts, right? And so in SNAP, we use hard thoughts and cool thoughts. So hard thoughts are those really thoughts that are unhelpful thinking. So it could be
Right.
like, why is my kid doing this? And it's not helping you stay calm or respond in a productive way. And so changing it to a cool thought. So it could be like, you know what, maybe my child is trying to tell me something, right? Something that is helpful. And so I find parents have responded that that is a really helpful strategy for them because they're starting to notice their hard thoughts, take a breath and change it into a cool thought before responding. And it just changes the dynamic of the conversation.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you for bringing that up because our thoughts, right? They guide and dictate our behavior in many ways. They push our behavior. So just think about this. If your hard thought is, I can't believe he did that to me, that he did that on purpose. Are you going to be calm? And how might you be react? You're not going to be calm. Your body cues are going to tell you, I'm tense, I'm tight, I'm sweating, my heart might be racing, right? So it's really important to acknowledge, is that realistic? Is that thought realistic? Is it helpful? And try to really change that hard thought, as you said, to a cool thought. You know what? I can handle this. This is really hard for me right now, but I can do this. All right. Farai, you want to add anything before we go on to the next
Yes,
question or?
I do.
Okay.
One of the I'm going to mention it, and if there are any SNAP parents in the chat section, they could probably echo this. But one of the things that has been helpful, we actually just had a boys group that we just finished up a little while ago, and one of the things that they were also echoing, not only with this group but with many of our groups, is because I don't know if at any point, Leena, you're gonna go into the structure of the groups. But
I
when we have groups, they normally have while the caregivers are in one group, the children are also in a group at the same time. So they're covering content that complements each other. And so what happens is the work is kind of aligned, so the topics are aligned, but the biggest piece is the learning log and the wheel of self-control, which is in the boys
okay.
coalition book, right? And so what happens
Right.
is one of our caregivers were sharing that in looking at their child's learning log and their will of self-control, then being able to identify and see exactly what's going on with their child. So as the child completes a learning log, so learning log is essentially a piece of paper that has a couple of different prompts asking you what happened, when did it happen,
So
who
we
was
call that a
there,
trigger, right? That's
right,
the
right,
trigger.
right.
Like what
so
happened? Yeah.
so they captures the first part of it is just tracking the where and the when, so you can sort of look at patterns, right? And then once you actually go into the actual learning log, like you mentioned, is the trigger, what set you off, right? And then you look at body cues. What was happening in your body that let you know that you were feeling this way? What feelings were attached to it? And what were you thinking? I like Amanda was saying the heart thoughts. What was your heart thought? And then going into the will of self-control, you have the how did you change that heart thought into a cool thought? What was your plan? What did you choose to do? So being able to see for your child and identify for your child, and then the caregivers also have an opportunity to also complete these learning logs and also reflect. And what they were saying is, I didn't know this is what my child was experiencing. it's interesting that I never thought about this, and that might have been what they were thinking. And then for me, now I have more insight as to what's going on with my child. And then for me, as I'm completing it, I'm looking back at this learning like, I was so angry when I was doing this. I didn't realize I do all these kind of things. But sometimes we just
And that's why we call
and
that's why we call it a learning log, right? That's why it's called a SNAP learning log, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like getting different perspectives, right? Maybe not understanding, the situation from a child's point of view, right? And we just see the behavior as something wrong or bad or there they go again. But yeah, you're right, Farai. It's really seeing a different perspective for yourself, but also from a child's little child's view, right? What's going on there in their little world?
Well, thank you for sharing those, because I know because of time, we don't have time to go through all. There's so many incredible strategies that we can share. If we had a couple of hours, we'd be able to do this. Maybe we need a part 1 and a part 2 or something. But thank you. Like, you guys are, even though you said we're not experts, you are, in the sense, with this wealth of knowledge you have. So one of the things that I found really helpful, understanding as a young parent, and being teaching SNAP for 36 years here, is something we call the reinforcement trap. Okay, it's called a trap for a reason. It's called the reinforcement trap. So I'm going to share an example. Sorry, Melissa. My first daughter, Melissa, I have 2 daughters. Jessie is 26. Melissa is going to be 30 in June, and very different types of personalities. Okay, Melissa was our Yangy one, talkative, very fast, and all that. And so she was 2 years old, and I know it's hard to believe. She really didn't have a temper tantrum up to this point, so it's hard to believe. But work with me here. Is I was home. Enzo was out working late, and so I needed to go to the store. And it was 8:30. So what was my first error right there as a parent caregiver management thing? Where should a 2-year-old be at 8:30?
In bed.
Or getting ready for bed, right? But no, that's not me. I'm an adult. So I took her, I went in the car, we went to the drugstore. And as we were walking into the drugstore, right there was the bin of those balls. Those little they're only $1, baseball, football, that kind of stuff, spongy things. Anyway, so she took one, and I was kind of rushed. So I thought, okay, whatever. So we're walking around the store, and she's holding on, and I'm holding on to her. And then we get to the line to pay because the store is closing. And the line, it was a long lineup. And a lot of the people in that lineup were my neighbors who know kind of what I do. And I said, Melissa, you need to put, okay, because we were second in line, and there was a woman in front of me, and I said, Melissa, you need to put the ball back in the bin. And she looked at me, she goes, no. And I looked at, because she was free of very, and I went, Melissa, you need to actually put the ball back in the bin. So I got a little bit more firm, but still, no. And she started to scream, like, out of nowhere. She started to scream. So I picked her. I thought, oh my gosh, if I can't do what our families say and suggest us to do, I'm going to quit tomorrow because I feel like a hypocrite, right? This parenting thing is really hard. So I picked her up, took the ball, put it in the bin. She's screaming, screaming, and I'm holding her like a football under my arm. And the woman in front of me says, oh dear, don't worry. She'll outgrow it. I have grandkids and kids. And all I can think about was I was beet red. My body cues, I was hot. My heart was pounding a mile a minute. I'm looking around, everybody's kind of chuckling and smiling because, like, it's not easy, right? And I pay and I get out of there. And the moment we got out of the store, she stopped. She just stopped. But I was still aroused, right? My body cues were still there. My heart thought was, I can't believe she's doing that to me. I can't believe she embarrassed me like that. Do you really think a 2-year-old knows I'm going to do this and I'm going to embarrass my mom? So we call that a little bit. Now, had I given in to her, so talking about the reinforcement trap, had I given in to her, it was a buck. We could have walked out of there, no problem. But had I given in to her, what might she have done the next time we went to the store?
Well, I don't know, Leena, but there'd be a pretty good chance that
Right?
that ball would be very tempting again.
Right? And what would she do if I gave in to her and she had this temper tantrum and I gave in to her? What would she do? What would she know she needed to do in order to get what she wanted?
That
Well, it's not an
behavior
expectation.
worked.
Yeah, yeah,
To,
yeah.
To scream, yell,
Temper
have a
tantrum.
temper tantrum. Okay. And then that is part of the reinforcement trap. So I'm wondering, can someone explain it a little bit easier? So say for I'm going to ask you to explain it a little bit. So if somebody walks into their room, they want their child to clean their room, explain it when the reinforcement trap actually happens.
Right. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this without using the same words as reinforcement. And so,
Yeah.
just to start off, the reinforcement trap, we also refer to as a coercive cycle,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and when we think of a cycle, think of something going round and round and round. So it starts at some point, and something happens, another thing happens, and then we kind of get on this Ferris wheel, so to speak, of a continuum of continuing the same cycle. So, I guess what can help us understand that could be so an interaction between a caregiver. I use caregiver because a lot of people who are listening, they might be a parent, a
Yeah.
grandparent. I want to be
Thank
inclusive
you.
and include
Yeah.
that different people play different roles in our children's lives, right? So a caregiver can be having an interaction with their child, right? And so, like you mentioned at the beginning, was when you were having this interaction with your child is identified. They want this ball, right? And so the child is not interacting with you and indicating to you that they want this ball, but you have an expectation. You want that child to put the ball away. So your response to your child's behavior, which is ball, 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 right, is put it away, right? And then the child then responds, right, in a way that the behavior continues and escalates, and you go back and forth with each other. Put the ball away. No. Put the ball away. No. I don't want to. I don't want to. So you can
And
get
you kind
stuck
of
in that.
start to escalate and you start to escalate,
Right.
right?
And
Because
it
now
becomes
you're
a
getting
power play.
angry, right?
It
You're
becomes
getting
a power
angry.
play, right? And you as a parent, you want to assert your authority and let them know who's the caregiver and who's the adult in the situation. But at the same time, you're also understanding that the child has a need that wants to be met, and you have to define for this child in this instance that or let them know this behavior is unacceptable, which is what you did, right? And you put the ball away. You say you're not getting this ball. So you could choose to continue to go back and forth with this child, right? And be stuck in this trap where there's a problematic behavior, there's a response, behavior, response,
Right.
or you could interrupt it, right? Which
Right.
is
So
you
so the way I interrupted was I just picked up the ball, put it a thing,
put it
and
away
then let it go and then walked out,
and let it
right?
go,
So that she knew. She knew that had I given in to the ball,
right?
then that would have been that cycle that next time she learned. So we talked about modeling and learned behavior, that the
Hmm.
next time I go into that store, I just have to maybe throw a temper tantrum and I get what I want,
Right.
right?
And
And
the ineffective response would be to say, hey, okay, fine, it's only $1. What's the point? Because
right.
sometimes it can seem like it's just menial.
And I think what really this alluded that really helps me understand is I don't know about you, how many times you've been in a store and you see a child having a meltdown and you really do feel for that parent,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so I think that's what, so thank you, Fry. I just wanted to see whether, because I felt that that reinforcement trap was something that was really important to really understand. So let's talk about because we're running out of time. We only got a few minutes left, and so let's talk a little bit about emotion regulation and self-control because that is something that we know. For example, the research has shown, especially for kids, that the middle years, under the age of 12, dealing with self-regulation, emotion regulation is really critical. It's kids at that stage can really, really grasp it. Not that kids that are older can't or adults. It just becomes harder and harder, and the effort that it takes gets harder and harder as we age. So what I understand is that auto regulation is really when we have to regulate ourselves, right? So when I walked out of that store and I was in that store, I had to take some deep breaths. I had to count to 10. I had to tell myself to replace my hard thought with a cool thought. And co regulation is when we help regulate through a relationship. And it's reciprocal, right? In that when I stay calm, my child calms down. When my child calms down, I become calmer. So that same scenario, the moment I left the store, she stopped because I was calm, she calmed down. Okay. So those are things that I think as we learn are really important to understand. So what are some strategies that you think are really important for say an adult or a caregiver when we think about co-regulate? helping our child to regulate? What is something that you've heard really works?
So I just want to say first off, just echoing that, I read somewhere or something, it's someone's quote, not mine. But it's our job to share our calm and not join in their
Oh,
chaos, right?
yeah, I love that
And
quote.
so I put that as my cool thought at the forefront of every tantrum. I'm like, I'm going to share my calm.
Oh,
Um,
that's a good cool thought, right? That's a good cool thought.
yeah, but then really it's around validation. For
Okay.
me is really validating that child's feelings in the moment. I don't agree with their behavior and screaming on the floor, but they are really angry and upset. So when I validate their feelings, I find that even my daughter just stops and then she goes, yes. When I say, are you feeling sad? She goes, yes. And then I go, do you want a
Okay.
hug? And she goes, yes. Instead
Oh.
of, stop screaming on the floor, get up. That just makes her do it louder.
Right. So I love what you're saying there, Amanda. It's validation, it's validating their feelings. For example, let's just talk about your child comes home and is really upset because maybe they didn't get picked for that group project, right? So it's important what you're saying to affirm how they're feeling, like that must be really hard. That must have been really hard, or you must be so disappointed. And of course she'd be felt upset. So that kind of helps to validate, but one of the things I also have really learned is that we need to avoid using but and use more because. Can someone give me an example of that? Anybody
Hmm.
give me an example of what a statement like that would be?
The child is saying, you hear a lot about, kids who may be feeling, there's um, low self-worth or self-esteem, they're feeling stupid, and they say, I feel stupid. And that's just so heartbreaking, I know, for a lot of families and caregivers, right? Like, you're
Yeah,
not
that's really
stupid,
hard.
and but, you just did this, 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 and this. And trying to smooth things over and kind of take the pain away rather than acknowledging, yeah, you're not feeling very good right now,
Yeah,
or, something's really hard or difficult for you. So tell me more about that. And so I think the
exactly.
buts can do, even in our attempt to make things right or easier for kids, can
Yeah, one of the statements
yeah.
I would say is, it makes sense that you're angry because your friend
Mhm.
hurt you, right?
Mhm.
Or I can understand that you'd be really angry because your friend pushed you out of the line for recess, right? So those are
Yeah.
kind of little things that really could help when we think about validation. So when we think about auto-regulate, now this is ourselves as well as our kids need to auto-regulate. And I realize we're running out of time, so hopefully you could stay on with us for a few more minutes, is that what are some strategies that you can suggest parents and caregivers can use to auto-regulate? We've been talking about SNAP, but we didn't really have a chance to really get into it. So what is SNAP? Who could tell me what SNAP is? Because SNAP is a strategy that stands for Stop, Nail, and Plan that helps you to auto-regulate, help you to use your self-control and emotion regulation. So who wants to, in a nutshell, we have to keep it brief because I think we want to show one video and then we're going to have to get off because I think we've run out of time and we had so much more to talk about. Um,
And Lena, we have a question too
yes,
in the
yes.
chat.
Is there do I want to talk about this first and then we'll go into the question? First, let's go into this last piece. So who wants
Sure.
to tell me what SNAP is?
Sure. I can go and talk about something. I can talk about Snap all day. But
Sure.
yeah, so stop now and plan. I was like, as you talked about, is what STEP stands for. But a lot of times, the easiest way that when I'm speaking with caregivers, is to say that a lot of times we go from having a trigger, something happens, right, and wanting to immediately solve it and deal with it, right. But there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of things that happen between the time we're triggered and the time we initiate something that happens, right? Whether we're aware of it or not, there are things that are happening that are affecting the decisions that we make. So the stop, when we introduce the idea of SNAP to children and family and caregivers, is to identify that in the moment when you are triggered, something happens within your mind when you go from where you get the trigger and you immediately want to respond without processing a lot of things that are happening. A lot of things
Right.
are happening by themselves. So you having those thoughts, right, that are happening, but if you don't identify them, right, and change and slow down that process, which is the S will be the stop. So we look at what do you do to stop? What do you do to regulate yourself in order for you to calm the process down, right, and not dive
Right.
into a response. So a stop can be what do I do to calm myself down? It could be counting. A lot of our children say counting. Some people say 1 to 10 is not enough. I need to count to 50. Because when I'm really upset, I need a while to calm down, right? So depending on how long it takes you to kind of deregulate your emotions in that moment. So stopping, which is could be breathing, taking deep breaths. There's a lot of science around breathing
Deep
and what it
breaths. I
does
use
to your
that. I use that a lot. Just
oxygen,
breathe. Just
right?
breathe.
Because you're losing oxygen, you're depleting your oxygen supply by immediately responding, and your body is going into this response. So you need to catch your breath, calm yourself down and slow down. And then that way you're able to process things slower. So go from that stop,
Okay.
which is your counting and your breathing. Then now and is that critical moment, right? That you make that decision. What do I do next? Right. So, and that's when we change our hard thoughts to cool thoughts. So you're
Okay.
challenging. What is motivating me to be angry? I'm angry because this child just won't listen. The hard thought is this child just won't listen. But in that critical
Okay.
moment, when you reflect and change that hard thought into a cool thought, you can think and say, you know what? What is, like we said, like we mentioned earlier, what's going on with this child that could be triggering this, which would allow me to have a better response? Because when you operate from this child just won't listen, it's going to be different from you operating from what else is going on with this child. You're taking perspective, a different perspective to the situation, which will allow you to have a different response that you normally would if you didn't stop and do that now and that critical moment, think it through, and then come with a plan that will help de-escalate the situation. So now you've had time to stop and process and breathe. You have air going through your brain. You can
Right.
actually think in a way that would allow you to think with your rational mind, not your responsive mind.
Not your reptile brain, right?
There you
Your
go, right?
executive functioning there, right? And
Exactly.
then I there are three things that a good plan makes. So makes your
So
problem
makes your problem smaller, make sure that it makes you feel like a winner and the other person as well. So you have to consider the other person as well.
right.
So it doesn't harm anybody else and you
That's
feel like
right.
a winner and it keeps your problem small. It doesn't make your
I
problem
always talk
bigger.
about, did that make your problem smaller or did it make it bigger? Right?
Bigger.
So let me show you, thank you, Farai. So let me show you a little video and then we're going to address the question and then we're going to, unfortunately, we're going to have to get off this chat at this point. So I'm going to share this because Farai described the strategy, but watch Johnny use Snap. Now, remember, it's a remake of an actual video of a child using it. So in order for you to understand the strategy, it was really stretched out. So it looks like something magical is happening. But look at the red light, yellow light, and green light. See if you can see what Farai was talking about, and you'll see the overlay of the red, yellow, and green. So let's see if I can share this, and it's going to work for you. Now let me just pull this up. Okay.
May I please have my ball back?
No,
It's not yours, it's mine.
I know.
Every day, children are faced with making difficult choices in the moment. At this moment, Johnny is starting to get angry.
I want my ball back.
He took my ball.
I want to hit him.
Johnny is using an emotion regulation cognitive behavioral technique called SNAP. SNAP has taught Johnny how to calm his body and emotions and replace his hard thought, I want to hit him, with a cool thought.
If I hit him, he won't be my friend, and I'll get in trouble. Maybe I can get my ball back if I can ask him nicely. Can I please have my ball back?
No.
I said, give me my ball.
No.
Before learning SNAP, when Johnny felt angry, he would lose self-control. Using SNAP helps Johnny control his body by using calming strategies, challenge his hard thoughts, and make a plan to keep his problems small.
I'm
I'm gonna hit him. Asking nicely didn't work, but I have to stay calm. Maybe I can ask him to give me my ball back again. Asking and saying please didn't work. What's worked before? I want to hit him. I'm just gonna hit him. I have to slow my breathing down. I can handle this. I need to pick a plan that's gonna work for me. I'm gonna tell him the ball is special to me. May I please have my ball back? It's my favorite ball and my mom bought it for me.
Okay, here you go.
Oh, thanks.
SNAP helps children make better choices in the moment, building healthier and stronger children, families, and communities.
Okay, so we've kind of run out of time, but we have a question in the chat. And Maria, okay, for that teacher, let me see if I can get this correct. Is that for that teacher, recognize this is a hard environment to learn in, scale expectations, offer body breaks. So these are suggestions that Maria has put into the chat to help us. Thank you, Maria. About offer body breaks. That's a great suggestion. And games to capture attention, and consider ways to offer a connection um, since students can't spend time together. I love that, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is absolutely an important piece to this. So I'm going to see if we're going to go down here and see if there's any other questions.
I think
Sorry,
we just have to read the question because
yeah.
they can't see it.
Yeah, I can't see the question. Sorry, I
I can
apologize.
I can see
I
the
can read it.
question. Oh, you've
Okay.
got it, Amanda. Go for
Okay.
it.
Sure. Yeah,
Thank
so it
you.
says I'm a teacher offering virtual class right now. How can I best support students in such a strange environment? I'm watching an entire classroom in small individual squares, so it can be difficult to balance teaching and watching body cues through virtual class.
Yeah.
Tips? Oh, teaching's
Yeah, I'm
hard right
sorry.
now.
Yeah, that is really hard, and I'm
Mm.
sorry. It's a really difficult time. Anybody have suggestions, especially those who are doing, because we're doing virtual programming as well, mental health programming. So any suggestions?
I
The only
just
other
want to
thing, oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Okay.
Amanda.
I just want to recognize that teachers have been put in a really hard position of being like first line where mental health will come out to, right? Where students will show their mental health and then teachers have to figure out how to assist them and bring them forward. So in this, one of my suggestions would be validating the experience for all of these students and just offering to them if they are struggling in additional ways to come talk to you privately so that you can
Yeah.
help connect them to where they need to be.
No, great suggestions, Amanda. Anybody else want to offer any suggestions?
Yeah, I was just going to add another thing. I know it might be different with a larger number of children in a room, but another thing that shout out to the SNAP team at Delta. I have some wonderful family and child
That's
workers that do
great.
really great work. But one of the things that they do really well is we incorporate, because most of the session that you're providing in the classroom teaching lesson is broken down into parts, right? So at different parts, giving a check mark for different sections. If you're able to, from 8:30 to 8:40, to keep yourself in your chair and to strategize, I'll be looking for a program leader or a leader for that time and see how many check marks you can get. A lot of times, I think being focused on an achievement sometimes can keep their focus on one thing as opposed to trying to stay well without, so that way you can sort of manage and maybe recognize for yourself as well. When is this child, when are they having the most challenges as well, right? Identifying, is it maybe it's too long, so you know when to incorporate body breaks, and so just breaking the session down a little bit and then giving credit or rewards, which is the check mark. A lot of times we think we have to give them a prize or something, but sometimes having their name next to a check mark or a sticker really uplifts them, and giving a lot of positive praise for the children that are doing what they need to be doing, right? You use a lot of positive praise, encouragement, and the gotcha, well, I wouldn't say the word, but the gotcha regulators.
We
So
gotcha.
you
Yeah.
catch them when they're doing well, right? Because you want to encourage that behavior, but you also want to show them what it looks like when they are doing well, how that makes them feel, and then that changes a lot. But it might seem like, oh, but it's just a check mark. But for them, being able to say, well, I was the champion of the session today. I got 5 check marks. But then even just for them to walk away and say, you know what, last week I got 1 check mark. This week I want to strive to get 2. just those small achievements, acknowledging those achievements, and then setting expectations for shorter periods of time can also help with you identifying the problem areas and then maybe looking at what can I target within this time period to modify my lesson structure as well.
Yeah, good points, because it isn't an easy time. And, we talk a lot about virtual services, and virtual services are excellent for many different needs and usage, right? It is. However, I've been saying this all along to government and others, it's great, but it's not for everybody. And our kids need to be in classrooms. We need to have human touch and human relationships. And so we hope that our world will heal. And on that note, I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time. And we were wanting to get in some other SNAP parenting caregiver strategies around active listening and effective directions. And so let me give you one. A really good rule is things like when then. And I call that grandma's rule, which is, when you clean up, when you put the dishes away, then you can watch TV. So that's an example of giving effective directions. But what I'd like to say is that I really, really want to thank everybody who was with us tonight. And I'm going to share some of these resources, and you can get them online. But the first one is this one here, which is a really good one. And this is available on our website at it's at the Child Development Institute, or you can go directly to the stopnowandplan.com website and you could download that. It is a booklet called Navigating the Middle Years with Self-Control. And in there, it's a really nice coffee book style and the live link one has actually the videos that I shared tonight. And so in there, it talks about what the middle years are, what self-control is, early detectors, but then it goes into a little bit about SNAP, but really it's about the tips. Some of the things we didn't get to tonight, which is around monitoring and listening and encouraging and effective directions and charting and rewarding and things like problem solving. So you can get that as well. On the website, there's also booklets like on lying and stealing and bullying, for example, for those parents and caregivers who are struggling more with that. But at this point, I really just want to thank this incredible panel who is with us tonight for this discussion. And, thank you everybody who sent your questions in advance, and hopefully we addressed some of those the way you would have hoped. And if not, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to assist you. Anyways, thank you everybody, Maria, Farai, Amanda, thank you so much. And thank you everybody again for joining us. Good night, everybody. Bye. Be safe.